If you've been watching, my name is James Williams Jr., and I just said that I was going to give you guys a Spider-Man Clone War review and how it really kind of affected me a little bit. Alright? The lighting downstairs was horrible, so we're back in the yellow room. Clearly, I needed better lighting. And to stay on base, I was talking about the Spider-Man Clone War. It's been done twice. I know it was done in the 80s. It was definitely done in the 80s because the products of that was Kane. And by the 90s, the Scarlet Spider popped out of nowhere, and Spider-Man went to jail, and supposedly he murdered a whole bunch of people that wound up in jail, and he went on trial and all that, and that happened between the 80s and the 90s. So if you're not up to speed with what I'm saying, go back and look for it. It's like I think a six comic miniseries, Enter the Scarlet Spider. I think I'm not really sure what the hell it's called. Just look for the first issue of the Scarlet Spider. I think you'll find him somewhere. And I think he started like springing off in other comics first, and then he popped up in his own. And one of the comics he specifically had, he was on the wall, and he said, if anybody's in this office right now and they're working, they're gonna really get a really good shot of my ass. All right. So all of this stuff leads up to finding out that there are clones of Gwen Stacy running around everywhere, and some of them are like dying or whatever. And Jackal's trying to find a cure, and there's clones of Spider-Man everywhere. So Jackal has manipulated Peter Parker to believing that he's actually a clone, and that Ben Riley is the real guy, and that Kane also believes that he was the real guy. So there was a three-way brawl between Kane and Ben Riley and Spider-Man, and eventually at the end they went ahead DNA tested by Reed Richards, and they found out to prove that Ben Riley was not the clone, and that Peter Parker was the clone, and that Kane was the clone. Well, then Kane vanished, and he went away. And then Spider-Man, Peter Parker, lost his powers. So they had like these books where it was Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and then there was Spider-Man. And then Spider-Man, Ben Riley was running the show. And Spider-Man, Peter Parker, was all about Peter Parker basically losing his powers and talking to Aunt May and Anna Watson and Mary Jane Watson, and Mary Jane got pregnant, and they were trying to figure out what the fuck to do. And then along common Barry, because in comic books, it for 15 years for us could be anywhere for them between a day, an hour, a minute, etc. I'm like, okay, well, this stuff started happening, and then all of a sudden she's pregnant, and then I'm like, well, damn, what happened 9 months ago? But 9 issues back, which was 9 months ago, there were nowhere near signs of her being pregnant or any of those things. And yes, Mary Jane also cheated on Peter Parker. Yeah, I'm up to speed on a lot of affairs in some of the universes and whatnot, and I'm like, okay, well, mostly Marvel because I don't really read DC like talking about it. I'm not a big DC fan. I don't hate them. I have the titles that I read in DC. Maybe not as many as I read in Marvel, but we're on Marvel right now, so that's where we're staying. So during the Clone Wars, after Jekyll injects himself, he becomes a little bit like he starts looking. He has like ears that look like Spock or whatever, some crazy shit. And he has one clone of Gwen that he actually is able to keep alive, and she disappears. She doesn't die, but the rest of them like all die. And see, it was the clone of Gwen that started Spider-Man going around looking for all this stuff, and then bumping into the Scarlet Spider and dealing with Kane and dealing with Jekyll, and then Jekyll messed with his head, and next thing you know, Spider-Man's a murderer, and now he's on trial, and they're trying to figure out who's the real Spider-Man, and it just kept going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Then they have these other spiders that are clones, but you have Spider-Side, and he's like a combination of Spider-Man and Venom and Carnage, and he's just as evil, but he's no Cletus Cassidy, so he's not as bad as Carnage. No one will ever be as evil or as bad as Carnage, but, then by the time all of it's over, as we start breaking into the 2000s, Eddie Brock is no longer Venom. He's now anti-Venom, and his girlfriend was Venom, and then something happened, and now Flash Thompson is Venom. So I don't know when that happened. I just know that I kind of stopped reading after they made Ben Riley Spider-Man. I liked Ben Riley as Spider-Man, but I didn't like the fact that he was a fucking dishwasher in Hell's Kitchen, and that he was dating the girl who supposedly he was in love with someone who was like something did happen and they didn't get along or whatever, and she found out that he was Spider-Man, and she wanted to tell everybody, and it just went from really good to clusterfuck, but it was like a train wreck. You had to get through the whole thing, and then at the end, they wound up fighting the Green Goblin again, and Spider-Man had got his powers back. I believe got thrown off a roof. I'm not gonna swear to it because I think that Marvel's done this one too many times with superheroes. Because Dwayne Taylor's done it at least twice to people, and if you don't know who Dwayne Taylor is, he's Night Thrasher. Punisher has done it to someone, and Spider-Man had it done to him. So, in the long and short, is that they like dropping people off of roofs. But in the end, it was manifested that when they got to fighting with the Green Goblin, Ben and Peter were battling and they were getting their asses kicked big time. And when Peter got his powers back, he put on the spider suit one more time while Ben was distracting the Green Goblin. And then when they got finished beating his ass, they forgot about the glider. And of course, you can't have two Spider-Men because that's not gonna work out. We're gonna kill off Ben. So the glider comes and impales Ben, and then they Spider-Man grabs the body and swings away while all the cops are looking and taking pictures again, thinking the Spider-Man some kind of fucking outlaw murderer. And then they find a way to fake Ben's death and all this other stuff, and then it's over, and then Spider-Man's Spider-Man again. So I think that went on for almost like 2 years. I'm not gonna swear to it because I started getting pissed off with certain issues, so certain issues I don't have, and I have to go back and find them, and I have to go back and get them. But the Clone Wars, I think it's called Maximum Clonage the second time around. The first one, it was called Clone Something Else. But the last Clone Wars of Spider-Man, as far as I know, up until today, because I'm not up to speed on anything else in the comic book world, because I stopped reading them again due to the onslaught thing. I had enough. And don't think that I don't want to read comics again, but I just got so angry with the direction that Marvel took everything that I was like, yeah, I'm done. And it hurt me so bad that I didn't even bother with picking up a DC comic either, because about that era, I think that was about the time that they were working on the other Supermen getting their things going on, because Superman was dying or dead, and you had Steel, and you had Connor, and you had the last son of Krypton, and you had the other one that was also a robot or a clone or some crap. And then you had John Henry Irons, who was actually Steel. So then I think the Shaquille O'Neal movie came out. I like that movie, regardless of what everybody else says. I think with today's technology, you guys can rebuild the Steel franchise and bring Shaq back in there. Make him a better suit, get it all straight. Make it like the goddamn comic book with the cape and the hammer and the big old S on his chest. That kind of thing. And maybe actually have the origin story told right, with John Henry Irons being a construction worker and not in the military. If he was in the military, I never really dug that deep into that. Anyway, after that, the Clone Wars had made me so mad, or Maximum Clonage rather, had made me so mad about all these Spider-Man and Green Goblin killing Ben and everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop reading Spider-Man and continue to keep reading X-Men. So I kept reading X-Men, and they started fucking up with Psylocke, and then they killed her, and then they brought her back, and they fucked up again, and they brought her back again, and then they made the X-Men, very few mutants were left on the Earth after the onslaught thing, and then I decided that it's probably about time for me to stop reading comic books, because when you start taking the heroes that we all know and love, and we've invested so much time in them, and especially after, like, when Psylocke became Asian, she just became, like, hot, sexy hot, and everybody was loving her, man, and then they killed her. And then after that, they brought her back. And then they started having all these, like, dimensional pops and shit. I'm like, you guys can't keep doing this shit. What are you fucking doing there? I don't know who was in charge. I don't care. I just stopped reading. I love Marvel, but I just stopped reading. Well, anyway, if you don't like my review, I'm sorry. It just ran out of space, and I'm tired of talking. My stomach hurts. So I'm going to sleep now. My name is James Williams Jr. This is Comfort Havoc number 2. Good night.